going to cause a problem, obviously, about that college, because that now you are sending the negative image about that college. And this happens with every college or every hospital, every institution. It happens. So the best thing really to do is to correct that in a timely manner so that it doesn't stay on a website that long. That's what, I just wanted to add on that to give, so that we don't now feel like Oakwood is not a nursing school, a good nursing school. It goes with, if they don't correct it 2-3 times, well, they'll be closed at some time. Yeah, they'll be closed at some time. Anyway, I wanted to come to a point that has been spoken here about the push for Houston area, or I think that's what I heard you say. I really could want to know, what do you mean by the push? So now, let me finish so I can. Yeah, okay. Then I'll leave you. Now, I do want also to comment that there is a way that the schools are treated like the churches. So a church starts somewhere there, and you are left by yourself. You can succeed or not. You must bring your tithes to this level, then we'll even recognize you. The same thing kind of applies to the schools. So the schools are left to struggle. So I do want to see the push to look at that element there and see how can we help that struggling school to come up. So what can you comment about that, and what is that push? There is another third thing I want to say.
It's not going to... If we can take it one step
there is one, let me just finish that one. Now, among this plan of bringing up these schools, there needs to be a collaboration. We don't want to make it a church thing. We need to get out of, this is our school. Excel, by the way, I was a chair of Excel at some point. We don't want to do that. We want to make it a constituency so that the churches know. So even if at some point, maybe somewhere in the tithes and offerings and all this, there is a section where really the churches contribute without even knowing, or at least being informed that they are contributing to that. So, for example, we have my school where I call it my school now because I'm a vice chair to the chair there, capable chair. At some point, we have to make that school. That's my dream. So don't throw stones. We have to make that school a constituency school, not a kiddie school. So we put it, even take it out of kiddie housing and put it somewhere where it becomes an academy, and all people in this area will be going to that school and will know, be aware that there is an Adventist school, a good school, which is supported by the conference, where the conference is actually part of the push for that, instead of just living in each school and allowing each church and allowing them and say, oh yeah, go ahead, you want to start a school? Oh yeah, go ahead. So many of them start and go nowhere. That is where the standards, because of what's in our mind, the standards go low because of that. Okay, so the question, what push is that?
So I have 3 questions written down here. So I have, what is the push? How do we help our smaller schools? How do we help break the mold of our school? So I'll kind of go reverse of those, if that's okay. And I'll do it quickly, because I see a bunch of questions. You mentioned it, actually, as part of it. If we move our campus off of a church campus, that tends to allow for a greater constituent buy-in, because it feels for oftentimes, I'm just speaking plainly, we're all Adventists, we know how this works. It means that it's hard for a church to invest in another church's property. You know? Like, hey, we want to put a new building at that church for the school. That's a tricky one. So taking it off-site, Katy has a cap as far as our student population could ever be. 40-ish? 50. 50. Not 250, not 300. 50. So yeah, we're going to outgrow that here in a little bit. Hopefully sooner than later, right? And when we do, our churches will be ready. So that's how we do it. As far as the smaller schools, by the way, I've only been in this job for like 10 months. So I'm fresh out of the box. But one of the things we're doing for our smaller schools is specifically our 1 and 2 teacher schools, which we have 4 of. We have a specific individual, Anna Luna. She works with Coggin, which is Corpus Christi's 1 teacher school. She is going to be a special element for all of our small schools to take off some of the administrative responsibilities. That's one of the steps we're taking as a conference to help out some of our smaller schools, because it's an incredibly difficult job. These 1, 2, 3 teacher schools, incredibly difficult, and we have a bunch of them. Unfortunately, some of our other sister conferences are majority 1 and 2 teacher schools. Oklahoma has 8 schools. 6 of them are 1 teacher schools. Only Tulsa and Oklahoma City are the only 2 schools in the whole state of Oklahoma that have multiple teachers. I know, that was the face that I had too when I heard that. Lastly, what is the push? The official push is not official. It is our bosses are aware that we have a major problem in Houston, which is we don't have the critical mass of students in order to get where we need to be. We're making the push at the ground level within each of our schools to get our schools filled up so that we have that critical mass, so we can come to our local churches and say, hey, it is time to use your borrowing power to purchase some properties so that we can space our academies out and we can have 1, 2, 3, 4 academies spaced out through Houston so we can serve our young people better.
So what I'm hearing is we don't have enough students at our schools, so that's why we're not growing. So the push right now is for that you to put your children into our schools so that we may be able to grow and we can address these questions at a higher level, because now our students are actually in the schools and we're stressing them with questions. So as parents, we have to do better. Do we have?
Okay. My question goes, does you guys have means of transportation, like for people that doesn't live close by? And secondly, among the 4 schools that you guys have, does it have a grade levels, like in terms of this is the first class, second class, among the 4, if you decide you want to take your child to the best one, like competition among the 4 of you? And lastly, lastly, does it sometimes those public school, they're more into grade hours, lastly like they did a STAR test, most of the class everybody got 100. How does your scores, because most of us where we come from, we always like A's, how is your grade level, to compete with other schools around or within you guys?
Let me.
He's in Pearland, by the way. For the question on transportation.
Okay.
We're all sharing, sorry.
Okay. So I want to go back to the previous question, push, and then I'll do transportation. So one of the things that on the Katy side, as far as pushing, is one of the things that I identified as we started our marketing for Katy is the schools are, as far as marketing, are quite siloed. You know what I'm saying by siloed? Like when Katie goes out, it's Katie. When Houston Adventist Academy goes out, it's Houston Adventist Academy. When Excel goes out, it's Excel. So one of the things that one of my incentives this year, or agendas this year, is to start breaking down the silos and maximizing our efforts as far as marketing. I reached out to Houston Adventist Academy with Pastor Castillo. I reached out to Excel, left messages with the school board chair, when we, as a collaborative group of the 4 schools or 3 schools in Houston, whatever it is, when we go out and market, it's not just the Katie, Excel, or HA. It's Adventist education, right? We're in collaboration with HA, where and Excel, we've gone to Nations of Praise that all 3 of us are present. And that's something that we're trying to promote in the Houston area. Now, that being said, we have to also be honest, churches are very territorial. Okay? That's just the bottom line. I'm going to be honest here. There are churches in Houston that I reached out to that Katie was turned down and said, absolutely not. You cannot come to my church because you are not in our constituency. And I, in turn, said, sir, I understand your position, but you must understand you're considered a mega church, which means your congregation is all over Houston. Why not give your parents and your children the opportunity to go to an Adventist school close to their home? So as far as the push and collaboration, this is the environment of change, right? And the change has to start with us. The conversations have to start with us. And as schools, we have to push that conversation. It may not be a pleasant one on the church's side, but the bottom line is churches are there for their members. That includes their kids. But that's the environment we have to do. As far as transportation on the Katy side, we do have a transportation committee. Brother Elijah is the chair of that. And there are several members that are in that committee that we are trying to put processes in place and raise funds so that there is a transportation from this school, from this church to the school. So it is in the works as far as the committees are in place, and they're trying to get something in place.
Oh, did you want to answer the transportation part?
What I will say about transportation, right now for Excel, we don't have transportation set up, but I think that as long as you all bring that concern, then we can start putting something together. But we don't know that there's a problem until people say that. So hearing that from you all, I think that's a good place to start.
I know Houston has routes because one of their bills accidentally came to the office the other day. So they had some tolls they had run up. And so, yeah, I know they're running routes. Specifically to STAR testing, the Adventist school system does not do STAR testing. However, we recently implemented MAP testing, which is 3 times a year. It takes the place of the old Iowa tests. For you guys that grew up in Adventist education, Iowa tests are no more. Those books are finally gone. But what it is a dynamic test that measures 2 elements: the academic proficiency of science, reading, language, math. Thank you. It's language art. Yeah, right? Yeah. So it's those 3. It's 3 times a year, and it measures where they are and then the growth between each test. And so it generates a number of reports. My kids got them recently. It was really interesting kind of looking at where they were ranking, where they were growing. and then kind of lining that up with what happened during the semester or during the quarter or whatever it happens to be. And so that's one of the things we do. It lets us know about ACT preparedness, SAT preparedness, where they would rank on STAR testing. So for our students that are graduating from 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, out if they need to go to public school, or if you choose to take them to public school, you will know generally how they would perform on those STAR tests. Again, it's just another thing that we try to give you so that you have as much information and we are as transparent as possible, and gives us more information to compare if that's something we want to do.
Okay. Before we take the question from Pastor, I just want to ask you something because you were touching on the question that I had. So the question is, if the kid is reading on a 12th grade level and they're in 5th grade, are they being educated in the 12th grade level? Because my son did attend a school and he was reading on a 10th grade level, and I know the answer to it, but I want you to share with them.
Would you, teachers, do you want to hit that real quick?
So, yeah. So from a classroom perspective, and this is one of the things that we also get to find out using the MAP test, is because MAP test is adaptive. And so it will push the kids, as long as they answer questions right, it will keep them going, And so I will, have a 1st grader who is ready for multiplication, when typically multiplication isn't really taught till the end of 2nd grade, beginning of 3rd. And so because we are in smaller class sizes, because we have, less students, we operate a lot of time in small groups. And so that allows for teachers to group students and work with them. Sometimes even depending on your numbers, you can work with them one-on-one to give them that support in those higher areas. Whereas in another situation, they would be in a general ed class. Maybe they could go out to gate classes if their school had that. But they would still be along on that same curriculum. So it's harder to, especially between 5th grade to 10th grade, for a general ed class to be able to give them that. But since you're in a smaller class size, and especially when we have multi-grade, it's a lot easier to give them access to some of that higher curriculum because you're already teaching it and you can just pull them in. So it's definitely a thing that we can do. It's definitely possible. And then we have a lot of, applications that allow us to put kids on their level to provide the differentiated, different levels of teaching that they need based off of where they test.
Thank you for answering that question. She wants to tackle it, and then we're going to go to Pastor, okay?
On the parent side of it, if besides all of that, we also have what's called the IXL, where students can go also in there at their pace to go through that educational thing. But I wanted to touch on the parent side. I was born in the Philippines, and as most of you know, Asians are very academia driven. Let me say that again, driven, okay? There are things in place in our schools where a parent may say, hey, my child is exceptional. I know they're reading and blah, 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 and I think they need to skip a grade and go blah, blah, blah. I'm saying that because again, I'm Asian. There is things in place that if you think your child is exceptional, that you could ask for acceleration, right? But the process is that they take the whole child, not just academic. Is the child physically ready? Is the child mentally ready? We do not make that decision on the local level. There is a process in place. It's a 4-step process. All teachers evaluate, their MAP testing results go to the Texas conference. They in turn interpret all of that, right? And then give it back to the local school. So if your child doesn't excel, it's not the school's fault, right? The educational decision is above the local level, but there is a process where that could possibly happen. And if it doesn't happen, then they will come back with a reason of, this is why it didn't happen, and this is what we need to work on. So there is that process.
Thank you.
Yeah, you have a freshly minted Seventh-day Adventist Harvard graduate on your panel. We want to make sure we have a question for him, because he sees he sees both worlds. So I know that we have to. I have one, but I'm waiting to see if anyone will have a question for him there. I just want to follow through on the push for the Houston area. I support Adventist education fully. But the question I have as that conversation is going on, are our schools that are already in the area at capacity? And if they are not at capacity, then why are they not at capacity, and are we addressing those from the leadership level? Is the question. That's a conversation I think we need to fix first.
Local leadership or conference level leadership? Like which level of leadership?
My perception is the conference level. Because you have to have, this is that. You have to have, if you do not have a central leadership driving something, you will have territorialism, whether you like it or not. So in order to break out of that, I know that sometimes we say that the leadership must come from below. I think that's counterintuitive. I don't know where that came from. But if you want to have it, if the leadership has to be centralized somewhere that everybody buys into. So that I think needs to come from this. So could you address that part first?
Sure. Honestly, if you look at kind of the history of Houston's Adventist school system, ebb and flow. I think we'd prefer to stop the ebb and the flow be more in a positive direction. And we can point to a whole host of different leaders if we wanted to that dropped the ball, that were well before us, that I don't even know about, because what we're talking about is something that's been going on for 20, 30, 40 years. It's been going on for a long time. And what I can speak to is that our current administration, Keisha, and I'll put their names out there. Keisha Norris, I mean just like my office, right? Keisha Norris, Raul Aguilar, Robin Grimsley, and myself, the four of us, along with the local administrators on the school side, are dedicated to filling up our spaces. And our schools are not full. Houston's close. They're always kind of full. I mean, they lost their whole church, for goodness sakes. So, I mean, that building's just vacant and nothing. And so they're getting really close. Katie's not at, Conroe's not. Do we include Conroe? Is that part of the conversation? Okay. All right, so Conroe's not at capacity yet. Excel's not at capacity yet. So we're, I think, continuing the positive push there. The leadership is focused not simply on growth, not the numbers, but the right kind of growth. Sustainable growth. And the thing that MAP does for us, the MAP testing, it allows us to look at whole groups, but also individual students. We grow not by the volume of students that we have. We grow in the quality that each individual student has in our space. And then we, as our communities, our church communities and school communities and parent communities and stakeholders, we become the best marketing. And I feel like that's what we are on the cusp of, is becoming these fantastic marketers for Adventist education because we see it move or we are experiencing it ourselves.
Can I respond to that as well? So, as many of you all know, in the region, we have a new president, Dr. Bird, and he is a huge proponent for Adventist education. He, is all about it in so many words. And so he's had several meetings with our area pastors, both English-speaking and Spanish-speaking pastors, to talk about their investment in, the local school there at Excel. Even though right now Excel was or is a single church constituent school, he's still working to get that buy-in. And so I do feel that there is a centralized leader that is making that push. And so even most recently, we had about 4 of the students from our Spanish-speaking churches come to our school, which was huge for the first time in a while. And so that does come with, another set of opportunities, when you're opening it up to a different language demographic. But it's something that we welcome as long as we continue to get the support. And so even though I think that is really huge, the push from our president. I also think that there is power within talking to people. Like, I will never think that you can't move mountains by having one-on-one conversations and going to different parents and saying, hey, we don't have a school, but there's a school here. We don't have a school, but there's a school here. What is our goal? Is our goal about voting power? Like, it's hard because, like, I'm Adventist, 4th generation, I know all the drama, but sometimes I'm like, we can do that or we cannot do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can invest in Adventist education and we can get our kids in these schools wherever they're located, or we can argue about space. Like, we can do one or two things. We might not be able to do both. And so it's just, sometimes it's frustrating because I'm like, do you want them in our schools? Like, let's show the conference, let's show our presidents, let's show the people making those decisions how invested we are in making it happen. And we can say, hey, that church is bringing their kids to our school. That church is bringing their kids to our school. They're not a constituent. Why don't we make that happen? So now, we have a greater monetary buy-in from the local churches. But I feel like that can start. If you don't see it happening up there, like, don't just sit there and be like, it's not happening. Like, let's mobilize, right? Grassroots made a lot of changes in our community. So mobilize and say, hey, we're going to start working. When Excel started, the history of that school, people were picking up kids all over the area because they were invested in it. They got a van and they packed up kids and had several drop-offs because the parents were about that life. They wanted their kids in Adventist education. And so let's not make those parents, outshine us. Like, we have more accessibility to technology. You know what I'm saying? We have more resources in which we can mobilize and get our kids to the schools that we want them to be at. So let's make it happen. We see our leaders are doing what they can do. It's a slower process sometimes, but we have a lot of power as well, and we should take advantage of it.
Yeah, my question is for anybody on the panel that's under 26 years of age. So for you two specifically. So my question was going to be, because I know that, Eric, you just graduated recently. I know, Esther, you're almost at that point, right, of graduating, from a 4-year institution. What, from your perspective, right, being so close to that, what would you wish you see in Adventist schools, specifically in the high school setting, right, that you say this would be very, very important right now to actually prepare other people that's coming up for what they're going to experience, whether they go to an Adventist school, right, institution, or whether they're going to a Harvard or some other 4-year institution?
Do you want to answer it first? Or? So so in terms of like public school system, because I mainly went through the public school system most of my life, I actually did go to Excel for a year. So I know it's different now, but I remember it being in the Funding Church too and everything. So, and I've been to the Oaks as well, which is now called the Hall. I don't know why they changed it, but the Oaks was as a better name. I don't know why they switched it to the Hall. I don't know why. I just don't get it. It's just, I don't know. The Oaks was just, it was just a good name. But what I can say is this. I know there's a fear with a lot of parents in the Adventist church when their kid is done with high school because they're going off to college and they're going to be on their own. And they're like, I hope my kid stays in the church. I hope they don't leave the church. And the thing is, like, a lot of churches now, a lot of schools now, a lot of public schools now, there's a lot of Christian, I think Harvard might have some, right, some Christian, like, clubs and places where students that are Adventist or just Christians in general could actually join those programs and those clubs and get that spiritual experience and have a closer relationship with God. I think the young adult department in the Texas Conference has ACF groups in public schools, like public universities like UGRTV, where my mom just finished, and Texas A&M, and I think Prairie View and U of H. They have a lot of those. So I get that fear, but sometimes you have to trust your kids and know that you've done your part, now it's their turn. And there's a lot of opportunities in those schools where they have those type of programs where they can, stay within, they have that positive influence, in that, community, and also get that close relationship with God. Now, in terms of, like, you said how to prepare the kids, that are graduating high school to college. Well, I will say this, it's a different ballgame when you're in college. It's not the same as high school, because in high school, they kind of spoon feed you, you know what I mean? Especially with assignments and homework. Like, oh, hey, this is what's going to be on the test, make sure you study that. In high school. Hey, these are all the assignments. Make sure you do those assignments and turn them in. It's working. In college, that's not the case. In college, you have to make sure that you know when your assignments are due, because they're not going to tell you most of the time. Sometimes they will, but most of the time they don't. And they also, in terms of like testing and like studying, different ball game. Like, you have to know how to study, like your studying style. Like I said, study groups helped me a lot in like my first year in college, first year at SWAU actually, and they helped a long way. So like, know how to study. Like, find your study groups. Know how to like make sure you have good friends and make sure you're surrounded with good people. And I will also say this with SWAU. SWAU, it's a school where there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, but it is a place where you can grow, and there's a lot of people that I have gotten really close with at SWAU that I know that I have made long-lasting friendships with. So that's what I will say. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, too. Adventist schools, Adventist universities are not for everybody, and I had this talk with President Patterson last year, and we talked about the Adventist school and what needs to change. And I told her that part of it is tuition. It is a private school. But also, there's just some kids who, they step into the environment and they're saying, hey, that's not for me. I'm leaving. And that's okay. So just know that. Again, like, you've done your part as parents. But again, you have to trust your kids. And so if they don't like the school, then that's okay, If they do like the school, then that's great. So just remember that, because I know that there has been like that kind of, and I have seen it before that, oh yeah, like, a public school, this and that, a private school, this and that, it's all on the kids and like all up to the individual, and yeah, that's all I'm gonna say.
Okay, Esther, because you were touching on that, I know you went to Prairie View first, and then you went to SWAU, so why the sudden change?
Part of it was the housing. My mom can attest to that. There was a little bit of a housing situation with Prairie View. So I was trying to get housing with them, but there were some situations where the housing just they weren't getting the housing right with me. And like, we put a deposit in, they never got back to us, never responded back to us. And then also too, like, I wanted to be on campus and I wanted to change. And I know I applied to SWAU my senior year. And I always had in the back of my mind that I might go to SWAU, but I was like, let me just see these other schools. So my mom was like telling me like, you should try SWAU. I think you're gonna like it. And like, we literally applied like 2 weeks before they started. Was it 2 weeks? I think it was like 2 weeks before they started. And they said, hey, you're accepted. Come on in. And I was like, okay. So I just we went to the store, started buying all the dorm stuff and everything. And I was a little nervous because, again, part of the other reason why I left too was COVID. Because my first year of college was all online. Even high school, I graduated with COVID, so we didn't have graduation and all that. So it was a weird transition for me. So I was a little nervous going on campus and being in the school not being in Houston. So I was a little nervous, but also really excited to go. And turns out it was a really good experience for me, making those friendships and also getting accepted to nursing school. So part of it was the housing, and part of it was just for me to try a new experience and try, the Adventist school.
Eric, you can take.
If I can add, the major reason was really safety. She felt safe in the Adventist school, and being that she did mostly online in the public school, she wasn't really. It was as if she was so scared of all these things going around in the public school, rape, this, that. So Elsa felt she would be safe, staying in that environment that, I mean, it's not paradise. It's not paradise. But there is, and for me too, there was peace of mind for me. Being, her personality, that she's outgoing, but I felt I had that peace in my mind. So safety also is one of it, and the spiritual aspect, but safety mostly.
Thank you for that response. I do have a question for Eric. I actually have one, and then you can also tackle the one that he has asked as well. Having to study in one of the most prestigious campus the world has ever heard of, to defend your faith how was it to defend your faith in a secular school? What challenges did you face, and how would you advise the young people regarding choices to make when they choose the campus they go to?
Great question. So I guess in terms of dealing with being an Adventist on campus, it was pretty difficult. One, because there's just generally not a lot of other students that are Adventists at Harvard. And so you come in not really knowing how you're gonna sort of manage, who you're gonna be able to talk to about going to church or doing other things. But luckily the best part about it is that there are a lot of faith communities on campus. We do have a Seventh-day Adventist chaplain who's part of the Harvard administration that works with all the other faith religious chaplains, which is great. There's a lot of there's a thing called the Harvard College Faith in Action, which is a group of Christian students that meet on Wednesdays for Bible studies and on Fridays for Vespers, which was also really great. But I guess in terms of defending your faith, it's really just a personal choice that you have to make. No one is really gonna attack you on what you believe in, which was something that initially I expected, but it really wasn't the case. Yes, people will debate with you because I guess people like to be intellectual and see if you really know what you're talking about. But other than that, it's really just about being sure about, or at least knowing what you know and standing on it, and then just putting the steps in place to make sure that you're staying on the right path. So for myself, it was really great to be able to just be able to do a devotional every day, be able to read the steps of Christ, messages to young people, be able to attend the local church. There's actually two SDA churches literally in the Cambridge area that are pretty accessible with a Uber or whatnot. My professor, my Swahili professor, is actually a Seventh-day Adventist, so I've actually went to church with him a couple of times, which was great. So you'll find people everywhere you go, and it's definitely not easy. It's definitely a very conscious and intentional choice you have to make to remain focused. Yes, sometimes you'll be really bombarded by a lot of influences and start questioning things, but just being able to remember that you sort of have a higher calling and that you've been called for to act and behave in a certain way is really just great to really ground you and help you stay connected to what you've been taught. And I guess to Lionel's question earlier, I think so. I didn't go to an Adventist school or anything like that, but in terms of my experiences talking with other students that have and just friends in general, I think some things in terms of what Adventist schools can do to better prepare students for college is one, making sure that their curriculum and their academic standards are really up to par in terms of what students will be facing when they get into college. One of the worst things students can do, regardless of where they go to school, is go into college without the academic footing to be able to handle the course load, because it's definitely even more rigorous than whatever they might have experienced in high school. Another thing I would probably say is also just doing more to sort of inform students of what they are to expect in terms of when they actually step foot on campus, wherever that may be. So having college prep courses where students learn about studying skills, or interacting with students on campus, how to find advisors and mentors on campus. Those are things we actually learned when I got to Harvard very early as part of like the first generation programs for students that like didn't come from like families that had multiple people going to like four-year universities. So I think having those programs in Adventist schools would be really helpful to like sort of like give people, Adventist students, an edge when they're like deciding colleges and like actually getting to campus, which I think would be really great. And I think another thing that Adventist schools could probably do is, I just had it, what was I gonna say? Yeah, I can't remember it right now, but I think those are two like really strong points. And yeah, so that's the way I see it.
So, if we don't have any other questions, we have questions from the audience. Okay, we want to take just a few more questions from the audience, and then I'm going to ask our panelists to do their little final wrap up.
Okay, well, lots of good questions and different discussions that have been made. So I want to also say one thing. A lot of times we say, when is somebody else going to do something? When is this going to happen? You know, who's going to lead the mission trip? Get up and do it. There's no place your kids should be other than immersed in God's word and in God's family. So if you're not able to homeschool, Adventist education locally is the best place to put your kids. The things that happen in the public school are a little bit far out there. I'm not saying the Adventist schools are better, but because of the small numbers, the teachers are able to keep track of the kids a little bit better. But my question is, and a lot of the parents will help you with transportation until there is transportation available. In fact, I know somebody that comes from Pasadena that would pass close to you that could help you get to the school. So just talk to somebody. Talk to the school. They can connect you with somebody and work on the public transportation. But my question was going to be mainly for the young people, asking them to tell us a little bit about their week as they go through the weekly progression and the spirituality during that week. But I decided I want to also add that to the teachers. You know, what is in the lower divisions, because this is college that they're going to tell us, but also at the elementary level, what does their spirituality and their week look like?
Like the whole, like my week and like my spiritual,
your week, just like daily and weekly.
Okay, so at Swell, and it's required for most it's required at every Adventist school, you have to take religion classes. Where if you transfer to an Adventist school or once you're in the Adventist education like university system, what was it? Fall semester, I took one class. It was an upper division religion class, and it was called Personal Evangelism Ministries. I don't know if you know Pastor Russ, but he taught that class. He's one of the best professors at our school, and he's awesome. Like everybody loves that guy. So. We took that class, and I learned a lot about evangelism. I learned about how to like defend your faith, but also learning how to talk to people, because that's actually the first step before sharing Christ. Because nowadays I feel like some Christians do this. They push Christianity, like they kind of force it on people instead of actually getting to know the person first. And that's like the first, like when Jesus was on earth, he knew the people. He actually got to talk with people and interact with them and got to know who they are. So like we learned in that class how to talk to people, how to interact with people, and we learned how to do case studies and Bible studies. And I actually was able to go on stage and do a Bible study and a case study in like 20 minutes and 30 minutes. So I learned a lot in that class. And learned in that religion class. And I also took a Christian beliefs class. And, well, by the way, those classes were easy, so straight up A's. It was, like, not a lot of work to do. I mean, Christian beliefs, we did. Listen, Professor Azevedo is a wonderful professor, but we were just like, you know what, let's just get this work done and, like, go on with our day. And that's what we did in the spring semester. I mean, we did some essays and then... But we learned a lot in that class, too. We learned a lot in that class. We went over the Seventh-day Adventist beliefs. We went over we went over how to defend your faith in that class as well, and we learned a whole bunch of other things too in the Christian beliefs class. So the way my whole week is that in our dorms, I think we had I don't know if we had worship credits, and so every day, actually there's a certain requirement for each level. So if you don't meet that worship requirement, you get fined. So like most of us are like at the beginning of the semester go to these worship programs every night, or like they have some like Wednesdays they have Wednesday night prayer meeting. They also have Women at the Well, and Friday night Vespers. So like all of us in the dorm were like, okay, how are we gonna do this? All right, so Monday I'm gonna go to the women's chapel downstairs so I can learn about Christ and also get my worship credit so I don't get fined. Tuesday, tip. Okay, let me put what I wrote, like how my day was, and like turn it in. And Wednesday night prayer, et cetera, et cetera. And so we did that, and honestly, it was actually a good experience having those worship nights like every day, because like, okay, yes, you're trying to get the credit so you don't get fined, but you're also getting the spiritual experience of it, and that's what I liked about it. And a lot of people would ask me to help participate, a lot of people would ask me to do this. Can you help me do this? Can you help me do that? So you're also like, you can also participate and actually help out too, which is what I like to do. So I actually got a beneficial experience by using my leadership skills to be in those like programs. And then also too on Sabbath, the Keene Church has a young adult service called Elevate, and I love the services because it connects with the young people. It actually they have a lot of like the atmosphere is really like is more casual, but it really does help connect a lot of the young people to Christ, especially those that are not Adventist, because SWALU now is getting a lot of non-Adventists now, which is, I think it's awesome. Mainly also, a lot of non-Adventists, and particularly a lot of them are in the nursing program. But they come to Elevate, and they learn a lot of things about our faith, and I think that's also actually incredible. So Sabbaths, I go to Elevate. They have breakfast every morning. They have worship service, and then Pastor Michael will come and speak to the young people, and the messages are all just amazing. So that's how my spiritual week goes. Like worship credits every day until you reach the limit. Some people go over the limit, like me. And then also going to Elevate every Sabbath. And then without the spiritual experience, really quickly, I do all my prereqs. I finished all my prerequisites, so it's just nursing school now. But I had a lot of friends that would help me through my classes and study groups, like I said. And then just, again, just having fun with my friends too, making those memories with my friends. So,
amen,
yeah.
amen. Thanks for sharing, Esther.
Okay, all right. So I'll chat a little bit about the.
I can go really quick. So I guess in terms of like my schedule, generally just in terms of like from Monday to Friday. Some days you don't have class, so you just have sort of like free days. But for the most part, generally wake up, try to do like a devotional from like the Bible app or something else that I've found. Go to class, have lunch, do like miscellaneous tasks, like just hang out with friends or whatever. And then towards like when you come back for bed, just like have a prayer and go to sleep. And then generally follows the same sort of routine for the most part throughout the week. Like Wednesdays, like I said, someday we have like HCFA has like a Bible study. So like meet up students at like they have like pizza or whatever, and we just like talk about like a Bible lesson. And like they actually have like a sort of like a youth pastor, I guess, if you could describe him as that sort of just like talks to us about it in a way that's very easy and like relatable to understand as a college student. And then like on Fridays or on Saturdays, I usually try to go to one of the local churches. But if I can't, I usually just like log into YouTube and watch the service that goes on here. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So in the elementary level, we have worship and Bible every day, except for Wednesdays when we meet all together at chapel. So we'll have We'll meet all the grades from we start with preschool, so that's 3-year-olds, and we go all the way up to 8th grade, and we'll all meet together to do our chapel. We have, prayer throughout the day. As far as our Bible curriculum goes, I love it so much. There's a lot of, some people, have different feelings. It does require a lot more from the teachers than curriculums in the past, and it does require more preparation, but the impact is so large. Like, it is huge, and it's a beautiful thing to see. I've been able to use things from our Bible curriculum, even talking with my peers and sharing with them. Even at elders meeting, when I have to do devotions, I will share things that I've learned there. And so I just think that our school does a really great job to make sure that the children are not just knowing who Jesus is, but knowing in their heart, having that relationship. And that's why the switch was actually made, because sometimes we were noticing kids were leaving Adventist education with facts, but not the relationship. And so the way that the model is set up is so that it can be transformative. So they have moments where, oh my goodness, it's just, like I said, I have little ones. So we have moments where my kids are asking God to be their forever friend with the salvation unit. They pray, they write a letter to him and say, whatever it is, asking for forgiveness and accepting them as a Lord and Savior. And these are 5, 6, 7 years. And I tell them, I said, you know what? Because sometimes my kids want to get baptized and the parents are not ready. They're like, you're 7, you're not ready. I said, the decision, you've already made it. I said, the baptism, that is the thing where you join the church, but the decision to make Jesus your forever friend, you have already made it. That's done. You are saved. And they just feel so good that they have the opportunity because, they're so little. I was going to say something about my experience really quick about going to Adventist school. I took Gift of Prophecy and I took History of the SDA Church. Did you have to take a History of the SDA Church too?
That's one of the choices, curriculums, you can take.
So that was so large at me understanding how this church works. And I would just love to see a greater connection between our churches and our school. And while I was sitting up here, I was just thinking, what if, because we're seeing a huge drop-off, right, with the young adults not being involved in the church. What if our schools worked along with the churches to set up some type of mentorship programs to where all the students in our schools had to be involved and shadowing some ministry where they're involved in our church? Can you imagine the impact? You have our 8th graders who have to do volunteer work anyways. They start being junior deacons, junior deaconesses, ushers, and it's something that the school is pushing as well. And you see that direct connection. Because my fear is I talk to my peers, I'm in my 30s, I talk to my peers, and it's a different conversation. And we need to get them involved while we still have them in your homes. And that can be a great thing to see. So it doesn't have to be a deep line of separation between the church and the school. That's our privilege. In Adventist education, we don't have to have a separation. We can work together and have our students in our schools working and volunteering in our churches as well. That's something I want you all to think about. How would you welcome that?
Thank you so much, Cherie. So the next few, you guys can answer. Just make it very brief.
I just wanted to address the part of worship with Katie. Katie, we have the similar curriculum as far as the Bible curriculum. But one of the things that we did with Katie is we kind of thought out of the box. As far as the teachers, we have Week of Prayer for the students throughout. We also have Friday chapels where we have pastors from International, pastors from Katie, and they come with the Friday chapels. But we also did week of prayers for the staff. We had 30 nights of prayer before school started, where we intentionally prayed for the school, the staff, and the parents before school even started. And then we had 10 nights of prayer for the spring semester when that first started. One of the other things, too, that we try to promote in our school as far as worship is when there is time for worship, we encourage the children to actually take part in it. If we need a song leader, we try to encourage one of the students to do it. Or if we need prayer, get them involved and have prayer. So that was part of that mentorship, part of that leadership that I think that you get in an Adventist school that you may not get in a public school.
Question from the audience, and then we'll go ahead.
Okay, I have the mic. I'm gonna, first of all, thank you, panel, for taking the questions. And my first question, I have two, is whether we have anything in place where the schools go and do like benchmarking from other private schools. I know sometimes as Seventh-day Adventists, we like to say to stay insular. Are there things we can learn from other successful private Christian schools? Do we have anything in place for that? And the second question I wanted to kind of ask, I know the last time I worshiped at Central Church and there was a presentation from Oaks Academy, and in their staff, I just saw like almost, they're all from one, maybe, I don't know whether it's the same place, but my question is, are we intentional in making sure that our staff recruitment reflect the diversity of the church? Because that can have an element in attracting our churches to send students there. And finally, I want to just make a comment that I think our schools will be as healthy as our churches are. If our leadership in the churches is not really championing education and in being intentional in pushing for that, I think we won't see much, change in the schools. And maybe there'll be one more question. Do we do any performance improvement assessment on the teachers and on the schools? Because I heard you say in Oklahoma you have like 6 schools which are led by one teacher. Do they still need to exist or to put the resources in that? So maybe you can tackle that. Thank you.
Sure. So as far as staff performance, we do evaluate teachers. That is done kind of systematically throughout the year. And obviously if there's a concern, and that can be a locally grounded concern, and we follow Matthew 18 as far as going through the proper channels as far as that goes, then there may be additional steps taken. Teachers get put on growth plans every year. I mean, we have 200 teachers strewn about our vast, conference, and there are a handful of those that are on growth plans. And so, yes, that does happen. As far as benchmarking, that is something that was actually brought up by one of our local campuses. They were curious if they could go over to Fort Worth and, local to me, right? And they said, can they go over to Fort Worth and look at this elite private school, Country Day, and talk to their educators and see what they do and what are the processes that they go through with building curriculum, with understanding a little bit better the way that they go through everything that they do. And so, yeah, that is something that we're looking at. Staff diversity is an interesting one. So our staff diversity has come up no less than 3 times during this particular hiring process with our schools. And it's schools that are saying, hey, we have a pretty even split within our demographics, yet we don't have that same student demographics, yet we don't have that same split within our teacher demographics. We are limited in that we can only employ Adventist educators. And so there is a limit, and we had a gigantic amount of turnover this year, which is on par with what we're seeing in our public school system. And slightly less than what we've seen on some of our coasts with some of our Adventist systems. We had a number of people coming off of the coasts, West Coast specifically. A lot of people come from California. And we generally have an older teacher population. And they are, unfortunately, in a place where they were their students are changing, their parents are changing, and then COVID happened. The combination of those three events really led to a mass resignation. So it's been very interesting as far as that process goes. But yes, that is something that local boards look at when they are trying to fill their needs. It is something that we do look at. So.
I want to thank each and every one of the panelists that were on the panel today. And also, I just wanted to mention that Excel goes up to 8th grade, Katie goes up to 8th grade, and Har goes up to 12th grade. So just keep that in mind as we close out in prayer. All right, bow your heads, close your eyes. Dear Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you for this panelist, Father God, as we dive into Adventist education, Father God. I pray that you prepare our families and not only our hearts to be more susceptible to Adventist education. And Father God, Lord Jesus, I pray that you continue to lead us throughout this Sabbath day as we head out. In Jesus' most precious name I pray, amen.
Also, our panelists represents from Katie and Excel, they do have tables set up out there. So if you want any other information, you can see them outside. Thank you.
Yeah, I know Elder Elijah had to leave and they told me to say something before you all leave. I just wanted to thank you all for representing the schools, Excel, Katie, and all the way from the conference, representing the education department in the church here in Texas Conference, and the church, of course, for supporting education. And for those who are in the education committee, keep pushing and supporting the ministry in the church so that we can have more people continue to join into the Adventist education. May God bless you as you continue to serve. Thank you.
And I want to take his class.
I know, he's really good. I just want to take your energy.
She make you want to take that religion class?
I know, right? Like, I don't remember my religion.
I want to go sign up for this class.
Was he there when you were there, Russ Laughlin, or no? He was there? Yeah.
That was good. Thank you so much.
Great.
God bless you. A student with Pastor Swoops.
Oh, really?
Buster and I were.
Oh, yeah, Pastor Swoops is good too. Everybody takes his class.
Yes.
Everybody takes his class.
I said I'm honorary.
Oh, my gosh.
Hey, so different energy from these two SYU graduates.
Yeah, the worship coming. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I went there 1 year. I think.
No, I was just saying hi.
Oh, hi. How are you?
I thought you were going to be on the panel.
Well, I guess they decided to